Our semi-drunken Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has some issues with the media lately. He's having a lot of trouble with news reports. Let's watch this clip.
Yet some in this crew, in the press, just can't stop. Allow me to make a few suggestions. People look up at the TV and they see banners, they see headlines. I used to be in that business. And I know that everything is written intentionally. For example, a banner or a headline, Mideast war intensifies, splashing on the screen the last couple of days, alongside visuals of civilian or energy targets that Iran has hit, because that's what they do. What should the banner read instead? How about Iran increasingly desperate?
Hegseth doesn't like the news that's coming out. As a matter of fact, he doesn't like the news so much that he wants the news to be different. Hegseth wants the news to be what he wants the news to be. He doesn't want news outlets to report what they see and what they hear. He wants the news outlets to report what he wants us to know, right? Don't report what you see or what you hear. If you report that, that's clearly a lie, even though you have the receipts, even though you have video footage, audio footage to back up what it is that you're reporting, what you see and what you hear, right? So even though you have that video footage, you have those receipts, instead, semi-drunken Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, wants us to believe what he says we should see and what he says we should hear, except he never seems capable of providing any receipts. He doesn't provide us any classified intelligence that was unclassified about what he says is true. He just says that he says it. And when him saying that he says it isn't enough, he tells us that the village idiot, Donald Trump, said it. So if we're not going to believe him, we should believe the village idiot. And we all know that the village idiot can tell the truth nonstop, right? Donald lies all the time, excessively. But let's continue to listen to Hegseth's propaganda, because it is entertaining, disturbing and dangerous, but entertaining.
Because they are. They know it, and so do you, if it can be admitted. Or more fake news from CNN. Reports that the Trump administration underestimated the Iran war's impact on the Strait of Hormuz. Patently ridiculous, of course. For decades, Iran has threatened shipping in the Strait of Hormuz.
So let's stop for a minute again. There has been ample reporting, as Hegseth is telling us, that the Trump administration underestimated Iran's willingness to interfere or stop, oil tankers specifically, from coming through the Straits of Hormuz, and that this was Pete's fault. This was Donald's fault. This was the administration's fault, because the administration should have anticipated that, right? They should have kind of known that. And I mean, I think that if they would have known it, right? If they would have anticipated that, like Pete is suggesting, Pete's saying it's patently ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Come on, you guys, how stupid can you be? You're ridiculous. It's ridiculous to assume that this confederacy of stable geniuses, these military savants, didn't anticipate Iran doing this, right? Had they anticipated this, in my mind, like any administration would have done, I think they would have warned us, right? I think that if a competent administration was engaged in this buffoonery, this catastrophic asinine war, right, which they wouldn't be, but I mean, you did have the Bush-Cheney administration, and they were far more competent than these dingbats, right? But I feel that they would have, this group or any group would have warned us, right? They would have said, Oil, before they executed the war, oil is going to get expensive. The price of oil is going to go up because we know that one of the things that the Iranians are going to try to do is stop the flow of oil. And then when it happened, we would be prepared for it. And, you'd have part of America that would be behind it, and you would be part of America that would be criticizing it. But at least you could show the receipt, right, that says that you actually knew this, right? That you knew it. And you wouldn't have to just tell us, of course we knew. We couldn't possibly, the news outlets are outrageous because they're telling you guys that we didn't know. Of course we knew. You wouldn't have to say that, right? Because you could just point back to your previous comments before the war that, prices are going to go up. And I know Hegseth might say, well, we are interested in being stealthy and stark. And we are killers. We are war killers. We are warriors. We don't let the enemy know when we're going to hit them, dumbass. Right? That's my interpretation of Hegseth, what Hegseth would say to that argument and the way he would say it. Except the problem there is, well, what about the day after you started the bombing, right? No more, the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows you bombed then. What about 24 hours after you stopped the bombing? Preparing Americans for what you supposedly prepared yourself, for what you knew, right? Why didn't drunken Pete Hegseth come out, or the village idiot Donald Trump come out, or some other spokesperson come out 24 hours after the bombing and said, this is what we're doing. These are what our intentions are. We need to prepare the American people, guys. The Iranians are going to try to stop the flow of oil in the Strait of Hormuz, and your oil prices might go up. But it's going to be worth it because we're going to win, and we're going to stop this madness. None of that happened. Days after the war started, when the prices of oil started to increase, and increase exponentially, and when when the polling had already come out that 75% at minimum of the American people were against this war, that news outlets had been, for a couple of days, news outlets had already been reporting that the price of oil is going to go up. Then and only then did they kind of start talking about it, right? And now, what are we, 12 days into this stupid war? Gas is averaging $3.65 a gallon as of today. In the United States of America, we're at over $100 a barrel. At the highest point in this war, gas had hit, the price of oil had hit $119 a barrel. There are analysts that are saying that if this war continues, that we may be looking at $200 a barrel gas, that the international community had to come together in a consortium to almost desperately to respond to this, to keep their economies from crashing by releasing all of their emergency, or a chunk of their emergency reserves. What are we, 117 million gallons or some odd here in the U.S.? Fact check me on that. I might have that number wrong. Then and only then does semi-drunken Pete Hegseth come out and tell us, well, we knew this. And the fact that we knew this was going to happen, and the fact that CNN has the audacity to come out and to tell us that that we didn't know, that's bullshit. And then you're going to see in a minute, semi-drunken Pete Hegseth is going to tell us that he is really excited that Larry Ellison's son, he can't wait till Larry Ellison's son takes over CNN. And that's because Larry Ellison and his son, I can't think of the name of his first name of his son right now, but it doesn't matter. It's not important. Because Larry Ellison, who is one of the richest men in the world, he is also he's the CEO of Oracle. He is a big MAGA nut. He is a big fan of the Trump administration. His son apparently is too, since his son was with Republicans at the village idiot Donald Trump State of the Union. They, not too long ago, bought Paramount. They in essence, own CBS News. They're turning CBS News into a propaganda network like Fox, or worse than Fox. Thanks to seeming pressure from the village idiot Donald Trump and the Department of Justice, pushing against Netflix that was trying to buy Warner Brothers. Larry Ellison and his son are obviously going to win that. They've won that negotiation. They're going to be buying all of Warner Brothers. Larry Ellison's son, the Nepo baby, who wants to be an entertainment guru, unfit for the job, but why not? He's going to be running the whole thing. And part of one of the properties that CNN owns, one of the that Warner Brothers owns is CNN. And you're going to hear Hegseth in a minute talk about how he can't wait until Ellison's son takes over CNN. Because then CNN will tell its viewers exactly what semi-drunken, unfit for office, Secretary of Defense cosplaying Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, wants him to say, so that Pete Hegseth looks better, so Donald Trump looks better, so that audience somehow can get duped into thinking that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump are real men who have big dicks, and they're both warriors. Let's continue watching the clip.
This is always what they do, hold the straight hostage. CNN doesn't think we thought of that. It's a fundamentally unserious report. The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better. Another example of a fake headline that I saw yesterday, war widening. Here's a real headline for you for an actual patriotic press. How about Iran shrinking?
Before I go any further, I want to comment on that. This is where Hegseth, in this speech, really kind of screwed up. He may I mean, the whole thing is a PR disaster. But this line, here's a suggestion for a patriotic press. I don't know if I'm quoting him exactly right. Patriotic press, right? There's no such thing as a patriotic press. There is a propagandist press, and there is a press. That's simple. The press is not patriotic or not patriotic. The press is there to do one thing, and that is to provide news. Yes, the press is the legacy news outlets, internet news independent news outlets, talking heads like me on the internet. There is analysis, there is opinion, there is all that, and that's a thing. And yes, the news business is the entertainment business, and that's a thing. I don't argue with that. But still, at its core, the news outlets that haven't gone Trump propagandist, I'm talking about Newsmax, Fox, OAN, the news outlets that don't report news, but just report what the Trump administration wants them to report for the most part. Those news outlets are not press. They're propaganda outlets. So they're patriotic press. And patriotic to these folks doesn't mean being a good American. It means making them personally look good. It means reporting on whatever sort of wannabe dictatorial content that the administration wants them to report on. In essence, it means either being part of an autocratic state, or in this case, an idiocratic state. We don't have a wannabe dictator. We have a wannabe idiot dictator filled with wannabe idiot dictatorial sycophants, right? So it means either being a part of that because you benefit from that somehow personally and you're okay with that, or it means being too much of a profane coward to stand up against it, right? That's the patriotic press. That's not the press. That's also not the history of the press in the United States of America. That's not the history of the press in Western democracies. That is the history of dictatorial, or in this case, idiocratic. I don't know what the right is, but I'm trying to say idiot democracy, idiotic democracy. It's being a part of that or just being a chicken shit, right? That's afraid of the administration. That's afraid to report properly. But CNN is not my favorite news outlet by any stretch of the imagination, and there is plenty of Trump ass kissing that goes on there. But they do try to report some actual news, quite a bit of it. They try to report what they see and what they hear, and they report to us what they see and what they hear, as do most credible news outlets. And again, as I talked about before, they actually have the receipts. They show us the video, right? They share the audio, right? They talk to the people who actually saw the shit happen, right? Hegseth just tells us what he wants us to know, or he tells us what he wants CNN to report, or he tells us who he wants to be who runs CNN. But there are no, so that they say what he wants them to say, but there are no receipts, right? There is no evidence that anything that he wants CNN to present to us is actually real. What he wants is the not real things to be presented in the news outlet that will, again, make him look good, make him look tough, make him look young, make him look like a real man, make him look like the cosplaying department Secretary of War that he so dreams of being. And again, I think at a deeper level, make him look like, he has a big dick that works and he's a very virile man. And if as long as they can do that, I think Hegseth would be happy.
Going underground. So you see, Iran's leaders are hiding in bunkers and moving into civilian areas. The only thing that is widening is our advantage.
So let me just go over, just to wrap this post up. Let's look at some of these news outlets, okay? Let's look at the war that's not widening, that's supposedly not widening, that's being represented by these propagandist outlets. Okay, so let's just look at the tickers, right? The news tickers are there's sort of the quick news blips that you'll see at most mainstream media news sites. This is NBC News, one that I'm sure Hegseth hates. Iranian politician says Ukraine is a legitimate and lawful target over drone support. If that's true, if the Iranian politician actually said that, right? And if the Iranian politician, if Iran determines that Ukraine is somehow a lawful and legitimate target, that would suggest to me that the war is widening. Iran's drone strikes are spreading across the Middle East and exposing vulnerabilities. Again, if it's true, if we were to read this reporting, and if it's true, that would suggest the war is widening. Now, Hegseth says this is all bullshit. There should be patriotic posts here instead. U.S. forces launched large-scale precision strike on Karg Island, says CENTCOM. Karg Island, from I've read a little bit of the reporting, has a lot of Iranian oil facilities. These are facilities that the Iranians use to store oil that they sell and that they use. That wasn't happening before. If we are taking out Iranian infrastructure to make life difficult for the average Iranian citizen, and we are also taking Iranian oil off of the market, the markets that Iran was supplying, which was, there was sanctions on Iran. So I think it was really the Chinese and a few others that were buying oil from Iran. But that's still a widening war. I can't see why that wouldn't be true. Strike hits helipad inside U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad, Iraqi security officials say. Once again, if a U.S. Embassy helipad got hit in Iraq, that's a widening war. It's not just that we are hitting Iran over and over and over again. They're reporting on that, but it's also there's other shit that's happening. Strait of Hormuz will not be reopened, said former IRCG commander. The commander said that. Hegseth might argue that, the NBC News shouldn't be reporting that. They should be reporting that Hegseth is saying that the boats can get through, that the village idiot Donald Trump is saying that the boats can get through. We're going to have the boats go through. They can go. It's very safe. And then, 3 oil tankers, because the village idiot said they can go through, one of them being a U.S. oil tanker, and all 3 of them are bombed. Iran envoy says some Indian vessels to pass the Strait of Hormuz. Envoy says France ready to facilitate ceasefire discussions between Israel and Lebanon. The Israelis have been bombing Lebanon incessantly. Again, that's an expansion of the war. Whether Hegseth wants to argue it's not, or it is or it isn't. Karg Island activities proceeding normally. Officials say Hamas calls on Iran not to target Gulf nations. Hamas, is in essence asking the Iranians to stop shooting at their neighbors. Iran threatens to destroy oil and gas infrastructure in the U.S., in the Middle East. U.S. warplanes draw spectators in England. This is a widening war, right? All of that is suggestive of that, and there's no reason that news outlets shouldn't be reporting on it just because Hegseth doesn't want them to. Here's Al Jazeera. I'm sure Hegseth would refer to this as a terrorist news outlet, but it's a perfectly legitimate news outlet. And from my perspective, I think Al Jazeera. I watch news from all U.S. news outlets except the propagandist ones. I only tune into Fox News and occasionally CBS News when I need to find something when I need to see what propaganda is being disseminated. But I look at all other U.S. news outlets. I follow BBC News, Haaretz and Jerusalem Post in Israel, CBC in Canada. I try to get news from a lot of sources. But I find that in terms of this moment-to-moment ticker of what's actually happening, whether it's the U.S. hitting, somewhere, or the Israelis hitting somewhere, or the Iranians hitting somewhere, or whatever, I find that Al Jazeera covers every single thing to the extent that I'm capable of knowing that. So I think they just have a very very comprehensive news ticker. Let's see. So let's just see what some of their points are. Iran, Sri Lanka discuss rescue of crew after U.S. strike on ship. Reza Pahlavi says ready for Iran transition under his leadership. Lebanon holds consultations to form delegation for talks with Israel. I don't know. I don't know what Hegseth's problem is with all this news. Blasts heard over Jerusalem after army detects missiles from Iran. Iran warns UAE residents to evacuate port areas in Abu Dhabi, Dubai. That certainly seems like an escalation of news that I don't think Hegseth could argue is not and isn't really happening. But the news that Iran launches new wave of missiles. Karg strike raises the stakes, but Iran is taking a measured view. That's more of an opinion and analysis piece. I could understand why Hegseth wouldn't like that, even though it's very likely true. U.S. Central Command claims that U.S. attacks on Iran's Karg Island destroyed 90 military targets, including naval mine storages. There's something about a U.S. strike. I don't get it, but I do get it. I think when we listen to semi-drunken and sometimes fully drunken Pete Hegseth, we have to understand that he is the propagandist. That in this particular war, we have an Iranian government that lies incessantly. We have a U.S. government that is incapable and is being out-strategized when it comes to this war, certainly from the PR point of view, that was caught flat-footed in terms of Iran's strategy to stop the entire flow of oil and upend the global economy. That is their strategy because they realized they could not win the war physically, but they can win the PR war and they can win the economic war, and they are doing it. And this should have been thought through by the Trump administration. But anybody who looks at these buffoons that we have in the Trump administration realize that they are incapable of it. And this is the first time I ever remember a U.S. war. I can't remember a U.S. war that I was particularly supportive of, but at least I knew there were competent people behind the wheel. That there were semi-intelligent and intelligent people making the decisions on the U.S. side, and they understood what they were getting themselves into and what they were getting us into, even if it was something that would be a terrible idea, and that they were at least competitive, if not in many ways more advanced, more ahead of the way the perceived enemy was probably thinking. That is reversed now. Now we have a war that is all bad guys on both sides, and the perceived enemy in this war is smarter. It's just that simple. And that's really scary from a U.S. perspective.